So I'm on day 6 of my 40 days of truth for Lent. And today I was just thinking about yesterday with the analogy of picking flowers on on the way to your destination. And I feel like Twitter, as I currently occupy that space, has been more of a distraction in terms of my endeavor to be truthful and to not lie than anything else. But because of this Lenten practice, this Lenten experience, I find myself wanting to be more truthful on Twitter and not just trolling for the sake of trolling. Now, I'm not going to say that my utterances or what I write doesn't affect people or trigger them in certain ways. But I'm coming to the conclusion that that lies, they often, like we all want to be good people. We all want to be on the correct side of history. We all want to be good allies to a cause that is deserving of our allyship. But I feel like oftentimes walking in the path of truth will amass any given person like a huge amount of enemies. And whether they take the form, like whether they take corporeal form or internet form, there are these ideological enemies. And I'm just wondering if we should care. I mean, the measure, like care is a word that's rooted in sentiment, and I'm trying my best to not involve feeling in my decisions regarding lies, but I'm learning that to lie feels comparable to telling someone the unfettered truth. Hurting someone feels just as bad as hurting myself. And it got me thinking about when I did the Big 5 personality test. So I was way off the charts in agreeableness and neuroticism, very, very low in conscientiousness, very high in openness to experience, and around the median in extroversion, because I have both sort of tendencies. I think everybody sort of has both tendencies. Nobody wants to be the center of attention all the time. And I think that my agreeableness, which I tried to remedy through Twitter, that was my experiment when I first got on Twitter a couple months ago. I wanted to be as disagreeable with everyone as I possibly could. And what that led to were bad feelings. It wasn't natural for me to just see an opinion that was completely false and destroy that person's opinion with, a study that I happen to have on hand, or, utterances from people that are specialists in that area, or just following their own logic down the rabbit hole into absurdity. And I'm starting to I'm starting to think like caring what other people think may be a hindrance to walking in the path of truth. If we care too much, then we sacrifice our ability to be honest with people. And sometimes, like I said before in one of my other videos, or in many of them, sometimes the kindest thing to do is to be truthful in the long run. And when I was thinking, why should we care? I was thinking, why do we care what other people think when it comes to what we know or believe to be true? What was it? Tyson whatever that science dude. I can never Tyson Gray something. I can never remember his name, but he was talking about religion when it comes to like a shooting. He said that that prayer won't stop kids from getting killed, and it was just such a non sequitur. Like, it made no sense. I don't understand where it came from. Of course, Shapiro called him out on it because Shapiro is a religious person. And I think that maybe even atheists would have called him out on it and saying one of these things does not relate to the other. The things that I'm realizing through being on Twitter is that it's not a reflection of real life, except when it is. And sometimes, and you can tell a lot of the time, especially with people that are like million plus blue check marks, and Owen Benjamin, because he doesn't lie. He doesn't lie. He might be wrong, but he's not lying. And those people, I think that they can be trusted in so far as their integrity, standing by their words. And I had mentioned that I think that Seth MacFarlane is a pretty good example of that. And he is a liberal, but he is measured in the way that he approaches ideas, except for the whole here are some kids that were shot at, listen to them thing. I was like, I also thought about, since, having strong opinions and core values and beliefs and walking in the path of truth can and always does amass you some forms of enemies, whether they take the form of activists or, Antifa, those cocksuckers, whether they take the form of those people, it's inevitable, right? But I was asking myself, is the man without enemies a beacon of social and moral excellence, like someone to look up to? Or is he an inanimate carbon rod? I kind of think that the man without enemies, and I say man as in mankind, which includes women and trans and whoever doesn't like the idea that there's two genders or whatever. I don't even want to touch that subject. But I'm thinking in terms of mankind, the person who has no enemies has no spine. The person with no enemies is just a thing. He is just a tool that is accidentally used to save something, or he's just there. And people just worship it. Like, let's have a parade for this inanimate carbon rod because it's so great. But I don't think that that's a person to revere. I personally think that disagreeableness, when appropriate, is probably the best way to move forward as a society. We need to have a sort of balance and checks and balances. Like, I love Jordan Peterson's analogy of the snake, where you have the snake, the left, the right, let's say liberal, conservative, and it slithers. And if you don't move with the times, if you don't move a little bit left when it's required and a little bit right when it's required, then you'll fall off the cliff. And in that analogy, there's a cliff it's a narrow path and there's a cliff edge on both sides. I don't do it justice. He does it better. And I started thinking about agreeableness in terms of politics as well, because that seems to be the place where I end up being the most disagreeable, but also now because I'm not doing it for kicks. I'm not trying to aggravate people just because I think that they're ridiculous, which I still think they're ridiculous, but I have to be truthful to my level of agreeableness in the future, because today I slipped back into that disagreeable state, which I didn't lie to the person in question, but the feeling that I had was comparable to lying to myself. And I don't really know how to work on disagreeableness other than maybe trying to say no to things. It's a tough one, and thinking about living a lie, which I'm sure people are familiar with that feeling, whether you're in a bad marriage and you're trying to convince yourself that it's working or that it could work, or whether you are a gay person in a part of the world that would throw you off a roof if you came out. What can we do if we're living a lie? What can we, especially if our livelihood or our survival depends on sort of hiding aspects of ourselves, not so much lying about it, but lies by omission. I think that's pretty much where I'm at right now. Lies by omission. We have these situations in life that put us in a position that we have to choose between survival and our path. And I guess the survival is not so much picking flowers, but gathering berries and things that we need to sustain ourselves. And maybe it's part of the journey of self-discovery to do things that are not necessarily in tune with our sense of self. And I know that our sense of self can change over time, but in the moment, it's not a good feeling. And I'm 100% aware that I've used the word feeling almost too many times in this video, and I do apologize to the Ben Shapiro fans. That being said, I think that there is something to be said for our feelings about what we do, but not feelings as a model that supersedes fact. I don't even know if I used that word correctly. Sometimes I just talk and then these words come out. I think I used another word earlier and I was like, was that the right word or is it the opposite word? I have the same problems with Latin phrases. Anyway, that's the truth. Well, what can we do? We soldier on. We survive. And we try not to lie. We try to tell the truth, even though people might hate us. And in my case, we hope to God that during this time of truth, nobody asks us a question that puts us in a compromising position. Because there are some questions that I'm praying nobody asks me for the next 40 days. Well, not 40 days now, for the next 34 days. I'm just praying. If my dad asks me if I've ever smoked cigarettes, I'll be like, ooh, eek. Yeah, sorry, Dad. And I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much the point of this whole thing is that I don't know. I want to be a good person. I think everybody wants to be a good person. But I'm not really sure how. I'm not sure how to be a good person anymore. Because sometimes being good to people just makes me feel like I'm being bad to myself. Anyway, that's day 6. It seems to be getting a little more difficult as the days go on, especially being honest here, because there's a big part of me that just wants to be in my onesie watching Buffy reruns. Anyway, thanks for watching if you're watching, and if you're not, then you're not. Peace.